Welcome to Sports Live Media on YouTube. It is your guy Sports Live with today's college basketball picks. This will be a group thing. This is the March Madness edition, and we're going to go through the brackets for the men's Division I NCAA and the women's Division I NCAA, and we're also going to do the men's NIT basketball tournament. So we're going to go through this bracket. I'm going to kind of explain how, when the games will be played, how it's going to work, and then we're going to make picks on who we think is going to win the game. It doesn't matter if we have any knowledge of these teams or not. So let's get into this. First of all, for the men's NCAA Division I bracket, there are 68 total teams in this tournament. 60 of the positions in the main 64-field tournament have been filled out. You have a round called First Four that will take place March 18th and 19th. There are 4 games with 8 teams. The winner of these 4 games will then be placed in the field of 64 and start with the first round and going forward from that. First round action starts March 20th and goes through the 21st. Second round will be March 22nd through 23rd. The Sweet 16 will be March 27th to 28th. The Elite 8 will be March 29th and 30th. The Final Four will take place April 5th, and the National Championship game will take place on April 7th. So let's get started with this bracket pick for the men's NCAA basketball tournament. We've got to start with the First Four. So we have, I think it's America University versus MSMM. Who do we have in YouTube land that we want to win this game? Because it doesn't matter if you know anything about the teams or not. Who do we have? Okay, I have 1 vote for America. I have 2 votes for America. Anybody else? Okay, we're going to go with America. All right, so next game is South Dakota State University versus North Carolina. South Dakota State University or North Carolina? Who do we have? Okay, I've got 2 votes for North Carolina, and that's what we're going to go with on that one, unless somebody else has anything they'd like to put into it. Next game is Alabama State versus SFC. I'm not exactly sure where SFC is, but I know they're a decent school. I've seen them play. So Alabama State or SFC, who do you have? Okay, it looks like we've got 1 vote for SFC, 1 vote for Alabama State. So in the event of a tie, in this situation, I can either choose to stay with my original vote or I can change my vote. And in this circumstance, I actually think I'm going to change my vote, and I'm going to go SFC. So we're going to go SFC winning that game. Next game is a tough one because usually these 2 teams are not this low in the bracket. However, they are this year. We have Texas or Xavier. Texas or Xavier. Who do we have? I have 2 votes for Texas. On this game, I was looking at this earlier, and I thought I was going to go Xavier, but then I looked into it a little bit more and found that Texas plays better than Xavier, so we're going to go Texas on that one. All right, now that we've done with the First Four, the winner of these 4 games will be placed into the bracket. So when we get to that appropriate game, we'll refer back to who we had for the First Four in order to pick that game. We'll start in the first round. We have Auburn versus Auburn versus SFC. Auburn or SFC? I have 2 votes for Auburn. Auburn it is. All right, next game is Louisville or Creighton. Louisville or Creighton? Who do we have? And again, if any of you out there in YouTube land wishes to vote on these, just put tell me who you want by writing it in the chat. Whichever team gets the most votes based off of who is voting. That's the one we get that goes in with it stuff. So, and it doesn't matter if you have any knowledge of these teams or not. We're doing this to have fun. So let me know your picks. And again, we have Louisville or Creighton. It looks like in this one, we've got one vote for Louisville already. I'm going to go Louisville as well. Does anybody else have anything they wish to vote on? Louisville it is. All right, next game we have is going to be Michigan or the University of California in San Diego. Michigan or UC San Diego. I have one vote for Michigan. Actually, I'm going to cast my vote for the University of California in San Diego. Something just tells me Michigan is going to lose, and they really shouldn't be ranked as high as they are in this tournament, based on what I've seen. But again, this is not just me. So I've got one vote for Michigan, one vote for UC San Diego. And again, in this situation, I either have the choice to change my vote or go with my original vote. And in this circumstance, I think I'm actually going to stay with my original vote of UC San Diego. So that's who we're going to have in that game. All right, the next game we have is Texas A&M or Yale. Texas A&M or Yale. That's an interesting matchup just by itself. So who do y'all have, Texas A&M or Yale? Okay, I have 2 votes for Texas, and that's who we're going to go with, is Texas. Texas A&M, actually. All right, the next game we have will be Mississippi, and this one would be Ole Miss. So Mississippi or UC San Diego. And UC would be the University of California in San Diego. I have 2 votes for Ole Miss, so Ole Miss it is. All right, next game we have is Iowa State or Lipscomb. Iowa State or Lipscomb, who do y'all have? Some of these teams, I wonder why they even got in this tournament to start with, and this is one of them. We're going to go Iowa State because I have 2 votes for Iowa State. All right, next game, Marquette versus New Mexico. And I'm sorry about the blurry issues. It has to adjust sometimes. There we go. Marquette or New Mexico. Oh, okay, so we have 3 votes for Iowa. Okay, New Mexico or Marquette. I have 1 vote for New Mexico. One vote for New Mexico. Anybody else before I cast mine? I have 3 votes for New Mexico. We're going to go New Mexico on that one. That's an interesting pick, but I like where we're going with this. All right, next game we have is Michigan State or Bryant. Michigan State or Bryant. Oh, hello, Addison. How are you? I'm glad to see that you're in here, and I'm also glad to see you as well, JW. It's nice to see a regular in this live stream. And to the newcomers, welcome. Michigan State or Bryant. I have 1 vote for Michigan State. I have 2 votes for Michigan State. And in this circumstance, I have 1 vote for Bryant. In this circumstance, the majority has the vote on that. So for 2 votes to 1, we will go Michigan State. All right, the next game, this one should be easy, but we'll see. Florida versus Norfolk State. Florida versus Norfolk State. I have 1 vote for Florida. I have 2 votes for Florida. Yeah, I have 2 votes for Florida. So it's Florida or Norfolk State. Who do we have? And for those that's voting, don't vote based off of how we do it. Vote on how you actually would do it, even if you were picking it, even if you know nothing about these teams. That's what we're wanting to do, is have fun with this. So we have 3 votes for Florida over Norfolk State, so Florida gets it based off the majority rule on that one. All right, the next game we have is Connecticut or Oklahoma. Connecticut or Oklahoma. I have 1 vote for Oklahoma. I have 2 votes for Oklahoma, and I have 1 vote for Connecticut. However, again, the circumstance rises to where majority wins it. So in this situation, Oklahoma 2, Connecticut 1, we go with Oklahoma. All right, next game we have is Memphis or Colorado State. Memphis or Colorado State. Who do we have? I have 1 vote for Memphis. Anybody else before I cast my vote? I have 2 votes for Memphis. I have 3 votes for Memphis. So Memphis with the unanimous consent on that one. All right, next game we have is Maryland versus Grand Canyon. Maryland versus Grand Canyon. Who do we have? Okay, I have 1 vote for Maryland. We're looking at Maryland or Grand Canyon. I have 2 votes for Maryland, and even though I'm going against my better judgment, I'm going Grand Canyon. However, majority rules on this one, and it's 2 votes to 1. So Maryland is who we will go with in that circumstance, due to the majority rule. Next game we have is Missouri versus Drake. Missouri or Drake? Who do we have? I have 1 vote for Missouri. I have 3 votes for Missouri. We're going to go Missouri on that one. I think Missouri is actually the better team between Missouri and Drake. All right, next game we have is going to be Texas Tech versus North Carolina Wilmington. Texas Tech or NC Wilmington? I have 1 vote for NC Wilmington or North Carolina. I have 1 vote for Texas Tech, so now I get to be the one to cast the deciding vote. And, that's just how it works sometimes. So I'm going, I don't know. This one's tough for me, and since I have to cast a deciding vote, I guess we're going to go. You can't vote twice on the same team. I know that's trying to help your cause, but I'm going Texas Tech. Thank you for trying, though. It is appreciated when you try to sway my vote, especially when I have to cast a deciding vote. Anyway, the next game we have is Kansas or Arkansas. Kansas versus Arkansas. Who do we have? Kansas or Arkansas? I have 1 for Arkansas. Anybody else? I have 1 vote for Arkansas. I have 3 votes for Arkansas. That actually, I don't know. The 2 did play each other once in the regular season, and Kansas did beat Arkansas, but it was one of those buzzer beater kind of situations. So, all right, we're going to go with that. Next game we have is St. John's versus Nebraska Omaha. St. John's or Nebraska Omaha? I have 1 vote for Nebraska. St. John's or Nebraska, Arkansas, or Nebraska, Omaha? I have one vote for Nebraska. Nobody else is voting, so I have one vote for St. John's. Oh, well, there we go. We have the tiebreaker there. We have 2 votes for Omaha, Nebraska, 1 vote for St. John's. Nebraska it is because the majority has the rule on that. So Nebraska it is. All right, moving on over here to the other side of the bracket. We have Duke versus America. Duke versus America. Who do we have? I have 1 vote for Duke. Duke or America. And it's like America University, something like that, but we're just going to call it America. Duke or America. 1 vote for Duke. Anybody else wish to vote? Because if nobody else does, I'm going to cast my vote, and I'm going with Duke. Okay, we have 3 votes for Duke. So Duke is going to be beating America. How much, we don't know by. Next game we have is Mississippi State versus Baylor. Mississippi State or Baylor. Who do we have? I have 1 vote for Mississippi State. Baylor or Mississippi State? Who else do we have? I'm about to cast my vote if nobody else does. All right, Mississippi State is my vote. So that's 2 votes for Mississippi State. Anybody else? All right, Mississippi State it is. All right, the next game we have is Oregon versus Liberty. Oregon or Liberty? I have 1 vote for Liberty. 1 vote for Liberty. I have 2 votes for Liberty, actually, now. So, anybody else wish to cast their vote? Okay, I guess not. So, we have Liberty beating Oregon. All right, next game will be Arizona versus Akron. Arizona or Akron? I have 1 vote for Akron. Oh, that one's actually, if anybody else has a vote, go ahead and vote, but give me a minute to think on who I wish, because this one is one of those tough ones that it could go either way. And also about these teams, both of these teams have the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde complex, and you don't know which one's going to show up. So, I think I'm going to go Akron as well. So we'll do Akron because nobody else cast a vote. All right, next game is Brigham Young University or BYU versus Virginia Christian University, I believe that is, or VCU. BYU or VCU. I have 2 votes for VCU. Anybody else? All right, we're going to go VCU. For those that's just joining me, thank you for joining me on this live broadcast on Sports Live Media today. We're going over 3 major college basketball tournament brackets. And what we're doing is we're going over the teams that's playing, and we're making a pick on who we think will win the game. And it does not matter what kind of knowledge you have for the team or not. And we go with whoever has the majority vote. So that's what we're doing. We're doing it for the men's Division I bracket first. Next, we'll do it with the women's bracket, and then we'll do the men's NIT. So right now we're in the men's Division I brackets for those that's just joining me. So the next game we have in picking today is Wisconsin or Montana. Wisconsin or Montana? Who do we have? Okay, I have 2 votes for Wisconsin right now. Anybody else? No? Okay, so we go in Wisconsin on this one. All right, next one we have is St. Mary's or Vanderbilt. St. Mary's or Vanderbilt? I have 2 votes for Vanderbilt over St. Mary's, and we're going to go Vanderbilt. All right, here's the one that's going to be fun and see where we go with it. Alabama or Robert Norris? Alabama or Robert Morris? Yeah, that one's pretty much plain and simple and easy to figure that one out. We have Alabama or Robert Morris, and we have 1 vote for Alabama. We now have 2 votes for Alabama. All right, the next game is Houston versus SIU Edwardsville. Houston or SIU? And I'm sorry about the blurriness. I'm trying to get it to where you can see the bracket. We got 2 votes for Houston, and Houston's who we're going with. Next game, this one's a toughie, so Georgia or Gonzaga? Georgia or Gonzaga? Yeah, I have 1 vote for Georgia. I'm gonna cast my other vote. I'm gonna cast my vote for Georgia, and unless we get somebody else that states anything different, we're going Georgia. All right, the next game is Clemson or McNeese State. Clemson or McNeese State? Yeah, I have 1 vote for Clemson. I have 2 votes for Clemson. Anybody else? All right, Clemson it is. All right, next game we have is Purdue versus High Point. Who is High Point? Okay. From what someone is telling me, they think High Point is in North Carolina, but I'm not sure. But Purdue or High Point? Yeah, Purdue or High Point? I've got 1 vote for High Point. I've got 1 vote for Purdue. And in this situation, we have a tie. So I can either change my vote or I can keep my vote. And you know what? For the fun of it, I'm going to change my vote from Purdue and we're going to go High Point. I think that might be an interesting matchup if it actually happens. All right, the next game we have is going to be Illinois versus, versus Texas. Illinois versus Texas. Illinois or Texas? I have 1 vote for Texas, and I have 2 votes for Texas. We'll go Texas on that one. Next game we have is Kentucky or Troy. Kentucky or Troy? You said my. Did you mean Kentucky? Yeah, Kentucky. All right, so I have 1 vote for Kentucky. I have 2 votes for Kentucky. Okay. Moving on to the next game, we have UCLA or Utah State. UCLA or Texas. I'm sorry. UCLA or Utah State. UCLA or Utah State. Okay, nobody's voting on that one, so I'm going to go with UCLA. All right, next game we have is Tennessee or Wofford. Okay, I had 2 votes for UCLA, so there we go. Tennessee or Wofford. Tennessee or Wofford. I got 2 votes for Tennessee. We're going Tennessee. All right. Now we move to the second round of this men's basketball tournament. Again, we've got a lot of March Madness stuff to continue going over, so just bear with us. We'll get to it, what we need to soon. Next game we have is Auburn versus Louisville. Auburn versus Louisville. Anybody wants to vote? Auburn or Louisville? Okay, I'm going to cast my vote for... Okay, I have 2 votes for Auburn. So there we go. We will have Auburn. Okay, Auburn it is. All right, here we go. UC San Diego, California and San Diego, or Texas A&M. California and San Diego, or Texas A&M.
Texas.
Okay, I have Texas A&M with 2 votes, so we'll go Texas A&M. All right, next game we have is going to be Ole Miss versus Iowa State. Ole Miss or Iowa State? Okay, in that one, I'm casting my vote for Ole Miss.
Ole Miss.
Okay, I got 2 votes for Ole Miss. All right, next game we have is New Mexico or Michigan State. New Mexico or Michigan State? Don't know who I'm voting for yet. I really don't.
Michigan State.
Okay, I have 1 vote for New Mexico and 1 for Michigan State. In that circumstance, we have a tie. I could either choose to stay with my original vote or break the tie. And I'm going to break the tie by going against my original vote. We're going Michigan State. All right, next game we have is Florida versus Oklahoma. Florida versus Oklahoma. There we go.
Florida.
All right, I have 1 vote for Florida. I have 2 votes for Florida. Florida it is. All right, next game is Memphis or Maryland. Memphis or Maryland. Ooh, that one's a toughie for me. Okay, I've got 1 vote for Maryland. I got 2 votes for Maryland, so we're going to have Maryland when, going forward in that game. All right, next game we have is Missouri or Texas Tech. Missouri or Texas Tech.
Missouri.
Okay, I have 1 vote for Missouri. I'm going to go 2 votes for Missouri. I think Missouri will beat Texas Tech, although it'll be close. All right, next game we have is Arkansas versus Nebraska of Omaha.
Arkansas.
And I have 2 votes for Arkansas. Here we go with that. All right, so now we're going to move. We're going to continue on this side of the bracket, and we'll do it that way until we get done. So Auburn or Texas A&M? Auburn or Texas A&M?
Auburn.
All right, we have Auburn. All right, so we have Ole Miss or Michigan State.
Ole Miss.
And that's going to be, okay. All right, next game we have is going to be Florida or Maryland. Florida. Missouri or Arkansas. Yeah, I know, that's a tough one.
Arkansas.
All right, I got Arkansas on that one. Next, okay, anybody else wish to cast any votes? If not, we're going to continue. Next game we have is Auburn versus Ole Miss. Auburn or Ole Miss?
Auburn.
I have 1 vote for Auburn and 1 vote for Ole Miss. In this situation, I get to break the tie, and I can either stick with my original vote or change it, and I'm changing it to Auburn. All right, next game we have is Florida versus Arkansas. Florida versus Arkansas. This is going to get tougher as it goes. Florida or Arkansas?
Oh, God. Florida.
All right, we got Florida. So, for that game, Auburn versus Florida, who do we have?
Auburn.
All right, so we have Auburn on that part of the national championship game. We don't have the other one determined yet, so we'll get there. All right, next game we have is Duke or Mississippi State. Duke or Mississippi State? In this situation, I have 1 vote for Mississippi State. I have 1 vote for Duke. And again, I have the option to choose to stick with my original vote or change my vote in the tiebreaker. And in this circumstance, I'm actually sticking with my original vote with Duke. All right, next game we have is going to be Liberty versus Arkansas.
Arkansas.
Or, I'm sorry, Liberty versus Akron. I'm sorry. Not Arkansas. Liberty or Akron?
Akron.
Okay, we've got Akron. All right, next game we have is VCU versus Wisconsin. VCU or Wisconsin?
Wisconsin.
All right, we got Wisconsin. All right, we have Vanderbilt versus Alabama. All right, we got Alabama with 2 votes there. All right. Next game we have is Houston versus Georgia.
Georgia.
All right, we have 1 vote for Houston and 1 vote for Georgia. Again, I could choose to change my vote, or I could stick with my original. And normally I would go against my better judgment, but I think Houston's better than Georgia, and since I get to break the tie, that's who we're going with. At least in this game. All right, next game we have is Clemson or High Point. Clemson or High Point?
Clemson.
I have 1 vote for Clemson. I have 2 votes for Clemson, so Clemson it is. All right, next game is Texas versus Kentucky. Ooh, that's a toughie. Texas or Kentucky?
Kentucky.
I have 2 votes for Kentucky beating Texas, so Kentucky is who we're going to go with. All right, next game. The University of California in Los Angeles or Tennessee? UCLA or Tennessee?
Tennessee.
I have 2 votes for Tennessee. That is who we're going to go with. All right, next game is Duke versus Akron. Duke versus Akron.
Duke.
Okay, I have Duke. All right, Virginia or Alabama?
Alabama.
Yeah, in this game, I'll give Alabama the benefit of the doubt on that one. It'll be Alabama over Wisconsin. We'll go with that. All right, next game we have is Houston versus Clemson. Who do we have? That's going to be. All right, I have 2 votes for Clemson, so we're going to go Clemson. We have Kentucky or Tennessee. Ooh, Kentucky or Tennessee.
Tennessee.
All right. All right, here's where it's going to get really, really tough to figure out. Duke or Alabama?
Alabama.
All right, I have 1 vote for Duke and I have 1 vote for Alabama. And, I will go against my vote and I'll change it and it'll go to Alabama this go around. I can't necessarily say that for sure on the next round. It just depends on who we have at that point. We have Clemson or Tennessee is the next one. Clemson or Tennessee?
Tennessee.
I have 2 votes for Tennessee. All right, so now we have Alabama versus Tennessee.
Alabama.
I have 1 vote for Alabama. I have 1 vote for Tennessee. So in this circumstance, I have the ability to choose who it's going to be. I can either stick with my original vote or I could change my vote and break the tie that way. And in that circumstance, I'm going Tennessee because I think Tennessee will beat Alabama because Tennessee has beaten Alabama twice already this season. All right, so now we have, it looks like for the national championship game, we have Auburn versus Tennessee. So who do we have, Auburn or Tennessee?
Tennessee.
All right, we have 2 votes for Tennessee for the national championship. That concludes the men's NCAA tournament bracket. We will now move on to the women's NCAA Division I tournament bracket. And just like the other one, there are 68 teams in this tournament. It looks like the first 4 will take place March 19th through 20th. The first round will take place March 21st through 22nd. Second round, March 23rd through 24th. The Sweet 16, March 28th through 29th. The Elite 8, March 30th and 31st. The semifinals will take place April 4th. And the national championship game will take place April 6th. So, in order to fill this out, we've got to start with first round. We'll go first round, then first round. The first round is called the first 4. So we'll go first 4, then round 1, then round 2, Sweet 16, Elite 8, the semifinals, the national championship game, and we'll pick who the national championship game or national champion will be. So let's get started with the women's bracket now. We have William S. Mary or High Point. High Point. Okay, I have 1 vote for High Point. I have 2 votes for High Point. And thank you for joining us, Custo Hockey. Right now we are doing the NCAA Division I women's bracket. For picking, we pick who's going to win the game, and it does not matter who will win or not. And it doesn't matter. Well, it matters who's going to win, but it doesn't matter if you have any knowledge of the teams. We'll go based on whoever has the most votes. So we have 2 for High Point. So High Point is who we're going to have. Let me put a check mark there. All right, next game. The University of California in San Diego or Southern Southern Utah, or Southern U is what it's called. It doesn't say if it's Utah or whatever, so Southern U.
Southern.
We'll go, I have 2 votes for Southern. So Southern it is. Next game we will look at is Columbia or Washington. That's a tough one because I think both of those are in the same community or near the same community. Columbia or Washington, and it looks like I got 2 votes for Columbia. So there we go. Next game we have is Iowa State or Princeton.
Iowa State.
Okay, I have 1 vote for Iowa State. I have 2 votes for Iowa State, so there we go. All right, we got the first 4 determined, so when it comes to those certain games in the bracket to where we have to look at the result of the first 4 to place it there, that's who we'll go with. So we are now in the first round of the women's tournament. In the first round, we have the first game is UCLA versus Southern U. UCLA or Southern U? Okay. I have 1 vote for Southern U. I have 1 vote for UCLA. In that situation, I have the instance of breaking a tie if nobody else decides to vote. And in that situation, I'm going to stick with my original thinking on that and go UCLA. All right, next game is Richmond versus Georgia Tech. And keep in mind, this is Division I NCAA women's basketball. So Richmond or Georgia Tech?
Georgia Tech.
Okay, I have 2 votes for Georgia Tech, unless anybody else has one that they wish to cast. Georgia Tech it is. All right, now the next game we have is Ole Miss or Ball State.
Ole Miss.
All right, I have Ole Miss with 2 votes. We'll go with them. Next game we have is Baylor or Grand Canyon. Ooh.
Baylor.
You know, looking at these records and stuff, Grand Canyon does have the better record, but do I honestly think Grand Canyon's going to beat Baylor? And I'm going to say no. I'm going to go Baylor as my vote on that. We have 2 votes on that, so anyway, the next game we have is Florida State or George Mason.
Florida State.
Florida State with 2 votes. That moves us to the next game. Next game we have is LSU or San Diego State.
LSU.
All right, LSU it is. All right, here we go. Michigan State or Harvard. And yeah, that's
Michigan State.
yeah. And actually Harvard has the better record, but I think Michigan State's going to beat Harvard.
I think they will just remain.
I honestly think that Michigan State is going to prove to Harvard that Harvard does not belong on the basketball court. And I'm going Michigan State for that reason, as part of the reason I was casting my vote. All right, here we go. The next one is North Carolina State or Vermont. North Carolina State or Vermont?
North Carolina.
I'm going with 2 votes with North Carolina State, or NC State as they call it. The next game we have is going to be Southern California versus North Carolina Greensboro. The USC is known as Southern California, or UNC in Greensboro. So
Who is it?
Southern California or North Carolina in Greensboro.
North Carolina.
All right, we're going to go 2 votes with UNC Greensboro. On that one, I have an idea of where it's going to go, but sometimes it's good to go against my better judgment. And in that situation, I'm going against my better judgment as the second vote for that, because I think there's going to be some surprises that happen in this tournament, and this game seems to be the one where that might happen and have a good chance of that happening. So we'll see. Next game we have is the University of California versus Mississippi State.
Mississippi State.
All right. We got 2 votes for Mississippi State. All right, next game we have is Kansas State versus Fairfield. And no, this is not Fairfield in Birmingham, Alabama. This is a university called Fairfield. So Kansas State or Fairfield?
Kansas.
All right, I got 2 votes for Kansas State. I did have to mention about Fairfield like that because some people do get the two confused that it's an actual university and not the city. Okay, so we have Kentucky versus Liberty as the next game. I have 1 vote for Kentucky. I have 2 votes for Kentucky. So Kentucky it will be. And yeah. All right. Next game. Oh, should be an easy one, but we shall see. Iowa State, or I'm sorry, not Iowa State. The University of Iowa versus Murray State.
University of Iowa.
All right, we got Iowa, and I've got 2 votes for Iowa. I think Iowa is going to beat Murray State. However, Murray State is not a team to be underestimated. It is going to be a closer game than most people think. I don't know what the odds are on that game because they have not released that yet, but Murray State is one of those teams that is like the gnat that won't go away, and it will bug you until you swat at it. It still will lose to you because you're trying to give it your all. But Iowa State's going to beat Murray State anyway. Just keep in mind Murray State will give Iowa a run for their money. Next game we have is Oklahoma or FGCU. Oklahoma or FGCU. Yeah, I'm going to have 2 votes for Oklahoma on that one as well. So, Oklahoma. All right, the next game we have is Oklahoma State versus South Dakota State. Ooh, that's a tough one. Oklahoma State or South Dakota State?
South Dakota.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. South Dakota State recently made the move from Division I FCS to Division I regular, like what we're doing, and South Dakota State is that team that really nobody wants to play because they're so unpredictable. So we've got 2 votes for South Dakota State, and that's what we're going to go with, is South Dakota State on that one. All right, the next game we have is going to be the University of Connecticut versus Arkansas State. Keep in mind, this is women's basketball, and also, for some that know these, keep in mind the history also, because that's really going to play into this. But Connecticut or Arkansas State?
Arkansas.
I have 1 vote for Arkansas State and 1 vote for Connecticut. I can cast a tie-breaking vote by keeping my vote the original the same, or I could go against that and change my vote, and I'm going to keep my vote with UConn. In most cases, if it were any other team that was not UConn, I would have changed my vote, but UConn, to me, seems to be the better of the teams in that one. So, moving over to this side of the bracket now, we have South Carolina or Tennessee Tech. Yeah, that one's a given. I have 2 votes for South Carolina, so we're going to go South Carolina on that one. All right, next game we have is going to be Indiana versus Utah. Indiana or Utah? Sorry, I'm trying to get that where it's not so blurry. Yeah, Utah versus Arizona, or Utah versus Indiana, sorry. Indiana or Utah?
Indiana.
I have 2 votes for Indiana. I don't think Utah's going to beat Indiana. Indiana plays with a style that Utah can't keep up with, so Indiana. All right, next game, Alabama versus Green Bay. Oh, wow. Alabama versus Green Bay.
Alabama.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. 2 votes for Alabama. All right, next game we have is Maryland versus Norfolk State. Maryland or Norfolk State.
Norfolk.
I got 2 votes for Norfolk State. All right, next game we have is West Virginia versus Columbia. West Virginia or Columbia?
Columbia.
Yeah, the 2 votes for Columbia on that one. They're gonna be the team that's gonna make some noise in this tournament for the women for sure. Next game we have is North Carolina or Oregon State.
North Carolina.
Yep, I'm going to agree with that one. North Carolina. And that's 2 votes for North Carolina. For the next game, we have Vanderbilt versus Oregon. That could be a tough one to call. Because, yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. 2 votes for Vanderbilt. Next game we have is Duke versus Lehigh. Duke it is. 2 votes for Duke. All right, next game we have is Texas State versus High Point. Texas State versus High Point.
Texas.
I have 2 votes for Texas State. That's who we're going to go with. All right, next game we have Illinois versus Creighton.
Illinois.
I have 1 vote for Illinois, 1 vote for Creighton. And again, in this circumstance, I could choose to keep my vote the way it is, or I could change my vote to break the tie. And in this instance, I'm going to change my vote and go with Creighton. Something just tells me my original thought was wrong, so that's what we're going to go with, since I have to break the tie. All right, next game we have is Tennessee or South Florida. Tennessee or South Florida?
Tennessee.
I got Tennessee. 2 votes for Tennessee. All right, next one we have is Ohio State versus Montana State.
Ohio.
All right, I have 2 votes for Ohio State. We're going to go Ohio State. All right, next game we have is Michigan versus Iowa State. Or, I'm sorry, it's Michigan versus Iowa State.
Iowa State.
All right, Iowa State has my vote as well. I'm not favoring Michigan on this one, although that might come back to bite me. That's okay. All right, here we go. For the women, Notre Dame or SFA? Notre Dame or SFA?
Notre Dame.
Yeah, Notre Dame is going to be my pick as well. So we're going to do Notre Dame on that one. Notre Dame is actually better than most give them credit for. All right, next one we have is Louisville or Nebraska. Louisville or Nebraska, and it looks like, yeah, this one shall be interesting. Louisville or Nebraska?
Louisville.
Got Louisville. Got 2 votes for Louisville. That's who we're going to go with. Next game it's the battle of the CUs. It's TCU or FCU.
TCU.
Yeah, so TCU it is. We now moved we're now in the second round, so let's go with it. We have South Carolina versus Indiana.
South Carolina.
All right, South Carolina it is.
Change to Indiana.
Do what now?
I'm going to change to Indiana.
Okay. And we have 1 vote for Indiana, 1 vote for South Carolina. And in that situation, I can either choose to keep my vote the same, or I could change my vote. And in this situation, I'm going to keep my vote. We're going South Carolina since I'm the one that has to cast a tiebreaker. All right, next game we have is Alabama versus Norfolk State. Alabama with 2 votes. That gets that one. All right, next game we have is Columbia or North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Columbia or North Carolina. I've got 2 votes for North Carolina. All right, Vanderbilt or Duke? Vanderbilt or Duke?
Vanderbilt.
I have 2 votes for Vanderbilt on that one. The Vanderbilt women are better than the Vanderbilt men, and I don't see Duke women beating Vanderbilt, at least not this year. Any other year, maybe, but not this year. So Vanderbilt it is. Next game we have is Texas State or Creighton.
Texas State.
All right, I have 2 votes for Texas State, so we're going to go Texas State. All right, we have Tennessee or Ohio State. Oh man, it's gonna get tough.
I gotta go Tennessee.
Tennessee it is. Iowa State or Notre Dame.
Iowa State.
I have 1 vote for Iowa State, 1 vote for Notre Dame. In this circumstance, I get to cast a tie-breaking vote. I can either keep the vote the same as I had it, or I can change my vote. And in this game, since switching, I'm going to change my vote. I'm going Iowa State. All right, next game we have is Louisville or TCU. Louisville or TCU.
Louisville.
I have 2 votes for Louisville. We're going to go with that. All right, now we're still in the second round, so I got to come back over here to this other side of the bracket. We have UCLA or Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech.
I have 2 votes for Georgia Tech. All right, Ole Miss or Baylor.
Ole Miss.
I have Ole Miss over Baylor, and I have 2 votes for that. Florida State or LSU.
Florida.
All right, I have 2 votes for Florida State on that one. Next one we have is Michigan State or NC State. North Carolina State.
NC.
I got North Carolina State, NC State. Oh, that's going to be good if that plays out like I think it will. All right, we've got North Carolina in Greensboro versus Mississippi State.
Mississippi State.
Mississippi State it is. All right. How are you doing, Nathan? I'm glad that you joined me for this live stream. Right now, we are going through the women's bracket right now, and based on whatever we wish to vote for, I'm going over the teams that are playing, and what we're going to do is we're casting votes to determine who's going to be the one that moves forward in our community bracket. It does not matter if you have any knowledge of the teams or not. Whichever team gets the most votes, that's the team we go with for the tournament bracket. When we finish the women's bracket, we will be doing the men's NIT. We've already done the men's championship tournament, but this is where we are right now. So we've got the next game is Kansas State or Kentucky. Kansas State or Kentucky.
Kentucky.
I have 2 votes for Kentucky. Unless anybody else has a vote, we have 2 votes for Kentucky. Kentucky's who we're going with, since nobody else responded. All right, next game we have is Iowa or Oklahoma.
Iowa.
Okay, I have 2 votes for Iowa over Oklahoma. Moving on to the next game, we have South Dakota State or UConn.
UConn.
I have 2 votes for UConn over South Dakota State. All right, we are finished with the second round. We now move to the Sweet 16. All right. I had 1 vote for South Dakota and 2 for UConn, so UConn is who we go with. Next game we have, you got to cast your vote quickly because we're trying to move through 3 brackets, so do the best you can. But the next game we have is Georgia Tech or Ole Miss. Georgia Tech or Ole Miss.
Georgia Tech.
Who do you have? I've got 1 vote for Georgia Tech over Ole Miss. I have 2 votes, Georgia Tech over Ole Miss. You have 3 votes now, Georgia Tech over Ole Miss. So Georgia Tech it is. Next game we're looking at is Florida State or NC State. Florida State or NC State.
Florida.
I have 1 vote for Florida State. Florida State or NC State. I have one vote for NC State, and I have not cast my vote yet, so we're going to go Florida State. So Florida State 2, NC State 1, majority rules. Florida State it is. All right, next game we have is Mississippi State or Kentucky. Mississippi State or Kentucky.
Kentucky.
I have one vote for Kentucky. One vote for Kentucky. Anybody else? Yeah, we already voted on Auburn for the men's bracket and stuff. This is the women's bracket. So we're looking at Mississippi State versus Kentucky right now. I have I have two votes for Mississippi State. We're going to do Mississippi State. All right, next game we're going to be looking at is Iowa or UConn. This is women's basketball we're talking about. Iowa or UConn. I have one vote for Iowa, two votes for Iowa. Moving on. Nathan, we already discussed the men's basketball teams and stuff. We had Alabama and Auburn going very far in the playoff stuff. We're now in the women's bracket. So I'm moving on. So next game we have is South Carolina versus Alabama. And it looks like you already cast your vote for Alabama. So South Carolina or Alabama? Okay, I have Alabama for 2 votes. We're going to go Alabama on that one. All right, North Carolina or Vanderbilt? North Carolina or Vanderbilt?
North Carolina.
I have 2 votes for North Carolina. All right, next game we have is Texas State versus Tennessee. Texas State versus Tennessee.
Tennessee.
I have 2 votes for Tennessee. That's who we're going with. Next game is Iowa State versus Louisville. Iowa State versus Louisville.
Louisville.
I have 2 votes for Louisville. We're going Louisville. All right, so now we are in the Elite 8. We have Georgia Tech or Florida State. Georgia Tech or Florida State.
Florida State.
I have 2 votes for Florida State. That's who we're going to go with. Mississippi State or Iowa. Mississippi State or Iowa.
Iowa.
I have 1 vote for Iowa. I have 1 vote for Mississippi State. So now I haven't cast my vote yet. And I'm going Mississippi State over Iowa. Since I did, since I had 1 for each. All right, next game we have Alabama versus North Carolina.
Alabama.
I have 1 vote for Alabama. I have 2 votes for Alabama. I have 3 votes for Alabama. So let's go Alabama. All right, next game we have is Tennessee or Louisville.
Tennessee.
Tennessee or Louisville. I have 1 vote for Tennessee. I have 2 votes for Tennessee. We're going Tennessee. Next game we have in the Final Four is Florida State or Mississippi State. Florida State or Mississippi State. Florida State or Mississippi State. All right, I got Mississippi State. Next game is Alabama versus Tennessee.
Ooh, gotta go Alabama.
I got 2 votes for Alabama over Tennessee. So we got Alabama. All right, so for the national championship game for the women's NCAA Division I basketball tournament, we have Mississippi State versus Alabama. Who do we have winning the national championship?
Alabama.
I have 2 votes for Alabama. All right, so we now have Alabama winning the national championship in the women's game, and we're moving on to the men's NIT tournament. In the men's NIT basketball tournament, we are going to make picks on who we think is going to win the games. And again, it doesn't matter which teams you have. In terms of my advice, right now we're just going over who's playing in the bracket. We're casting votes. My advice for someone getting started is to be flexible. Don't let anyone get in your way. If you feel that you are doing something that you are rightfully so doing, do it, and don't let anyone influence you to tell you otherwise. If you think you've got the skills necessary, then you do it. Moving on from that, in the NIT tournament, we have just gone over the men's basketball tournament. There were 68 teams in that. In this tournament, it will be the next 32 teams that are up and going for this. In the NIT, first round games are March 18th through 19th. Second round games are March 22nd through 23rd. Quarterfinals are March 25th through 26th. The semifinals are April 1st. The national championship for the NIT will be April 3rd. Keep in mind, the National Invitational Tournament used to be the most prestigious basketball tournament. It was around before the men's NCAA tournament. And there is a nickname for this tournament, too. It's called the Not Invited Tournament. Now, we're not going to refer to it as that. We'll refer to it as the National Invitational Tournament. But we're going to go through this and just make picks on who we think will win the game. It does not matter if you know anything about the teams or not. So, here we go. We got the first game of SMU versus UNI.
SMU.
I have 2 votes for SMU. We're going to go SMU. All right, next game we have is Oklahoma State versus Wichita State.
Wichita.
Okay, we have Wichita State for 2 votes. All right, next game we have is Arkansas State or St. Louis.
Arkansas.
Okay, Arkansas State. In terms of other advice I would have for getting started, know your niche and know what you want to do and what you want to talk about and stuff, and be knowledgeable in the areas in which you're talking about. That is one thing that would help too. So, next game we have is North Texas versus Furman. North Texas or Furman, and this is men's basketball.
North Texas.
I got North Texas. All right, next game we have is the University of California in Irvine versus Northern Colorado.
Colorado.
I have 1 vote for UC Irvine and 1 vote for Northern Colorado, and in this situation there is a tie. I can choose to keep my vote the same, or I could choose to change my vote to break the tie. In this situation, I'm changing my vote, and we're going to go Northern Colorado. All right, the next game we have is Georgia Tech or Jacksonville State. Georgia Tech or Jacksonville State.
Georgia Tech.
Yep, I agree with that. I mean, I know Jacksonville State is their first time ever being in the NIT tournament, but I don't know if their win-loss record reflects how good they are or not against Georgia Tech. Last I remember when they played Georgia Tech, I believe Georgia Tech may have beaten them a couple times over the years. So with that being said, I'm going Georgia Tech over Jacksonville State as well for vote number 2. Next game we have is St. Joseph's or the University of Alabama in Birmingham, or UAB for short. But St. Joseph's or UAB.
UAB.
All right, I have UAB as 2 votes on that one. The next game we have is Santa Clara versus the University of California in Riverside. Santa Clara or the University of California in Riverside. That's tough because they're both near the same area.
Santa Clara.
I got 2 votes for Santa Clara. We're going to go with that. Yeah. All right, next, we're going to continue on this side of the bracket until we get to where we can't do any more on this side. So, SMU or Wichita State? SMU or Wichita State?
SMU.
I have 1 vote for SMU. I have 1 vote for Wichita State. In this circumstance, again, we have a tie. We have a tiebreaker. I could choose to go with my original vote, or I could change my vote. And you know what? I just found some more information out. I'm changing my vote. SMU is who we are going with on that one. Next game we have is Arkansas State or North Texas. Arkansas State or North Texas?
Arkansas.
All right, I have 2 votes for Arkansas State. We're going to go with Arkansas State for the pick on that one. Next game we have is Northern Colorado or Georgia Tech. Who do we have?
Colorado.
I have 2 votes for Northern Colorado, and that's who we're going to go with. Next game is UAB versus Santa Clara.
UAB.
You know, looking at this game, you would think Santa Clara would be the better team between UAB, but I've seen videos of how UAB wins that one. Yeah, we're going to go UAB. And I have 3 votes for UAB. All right, next game we have is SMU or Arkansas State. SMU or Arkansas State. Who do we have?
Arkansas State.
I have 1 vote for Arkansas State. I have 2 votes for Arkansas State. I have 3 votes for Arkansas State. So that's who we're going to go with. Next game we have is Northern Colorado or UAB.
Oh, Northern Colorado.
I have 1 vote for Northern Colorado. So it's Northern Colorado or UAB. I have 1 vote for Northern Colorado. I have 2 votes for Northern Colorado. And 1 vote for UAB. So in that circumstance, we have 2 votes to 1 over UAB. Northern Colorado with 2, UAB with 1. So that means because the majority rules, we have Northern Colorado. That's who we will have. All right. On this side of the bracket, we have Arkansas State or Northern Colorado. Arkansas State or Northern Colorado?
Arkansas.
I have 1 vote for Arkansas State. So it's Arkansas State versus Northern Colorado. I have 2 votes for Arkansas State. Anybody else? All right, we're going Arkansas State since nobody else is voting on that one. And we have 2 votes to none on any of them. So, all right, next game we have is going to be on this side of the bracket now. We have Dayton versus Florida Atlantic. Dayton or Florida Atlantic?
Dayton.
I have 2 votes for Dayton. Anybody else? 2 votes for Dayton. We're going to go Dayton. Next game we have is Middle Tennessee versus Chattanooga. Middle Tennessee or Chattanooga?
Chattanooga.
I have 2 votes for Chattanooga and none for Middle Tennessee. So Chattanooga it is. Next teams we have is Bradley or North Alabama. Bradley or North Alabama.
North Alabama.
And I have 2 votes for North Alabama. Keep in mind, in this one, in the NIT tournament, from what I'm understanding, it could be Division 1 or Division 2 schools, so they could play in this. And I think North Alabama is a Division 1 FCS in football, so yeah, they're Division 1. Anyway, you can have Division 1 or Division 2 teams, but most of the field will be Division 1. There might be a few in there that's Division 2, but you don't have to necessarily have Division 1 or 2 status. But next game we have George Mason versus Samford. George Mason or Samford?
Sanford.
You know, I'm going to go Samford as well. We have 2 votes for Samford. All right, next game we have is going to be San Francisco or Utah Valley. San Francisco or Utah Valley. Yeah, I know. It gets tough with some of these teams.
San Francisco.
All right, it looks like I have 2 votes for San Francisco over Utah Valley. So we're going to go San Francisco on that one. Some of these schools I've heard very little on, and some of them just, I'm like, what are they doing here? And some of that does play in my decision on who I vote for, but a lot of it's based on the win-loss record and research that I've done prior to this live stream. So, all right, next one we have is San Jose State or Loyola in Chicago. San Jose State or Loyola in Chicago?
Chicago.
I have 2 votes for Loyola Chicago. I know I'm having a hard time pronouncing it, but that's just how it's spelled and that's how it's phonetically pronounced. So Loyola Chicago is who we're going to have in that one. Next game we have is going to be St. Bonaventure versus Kent State. St. Bonaventure or Kent State? Okay, so I have 2 votes for St. Bonaventure and none over Kent State. So St. Bonaventure. All right, so next game we have is Stanford versus CSUN. Stanford or CSUN?
Stanford.
Yeah, Stanford's got a lot to prove right now because Stanford, they got my vote, and I'm about to explain the reasoning on my vote on that. Stanford women's basketball used to be very dominant in the NCAA in the regular Division I women's tournament. This is the first time in 36 years that Stanford has not made the main women's basketball tournament. So since they did not make it, they've got a lot to prove, and they're angry, and they're going to do what they can to make the NCAA regret their decision. I'm not sure that will happen, but we shall see. But Stanford is not happy where they're at, but they're willing to play in this tournament to prove something. And again, 36 years consecutive being in the tournament is a long time. But yeah, that's the reason for my vote, and I didn't mean to go on to a spiel about that. Anyway, next game we have is Dayton versus Chattanooga. Dayton or Chattanooga?
Chattanooga.
All right, I've got 2 votes for Chattanooga. Chattanooga is who we're going to go with. All right, now this is going to be fun because then you have to choose where your loyalties are on this game. North Alabama or Samford? North Alabama or Samford?
Sanford.
I have 1 vote for North Alabama. I have 1 vote for Samford. Anybody else wish to cast the vote on who they think will win the game between North Alabama or Samford? Anybody?
Sanford.
All right, I've got 1 vote for North Alabama and 1 vote for Samford. And at this point, since nobody else is voting, I could choose to stick with my original vote, or I could change my vote as a tiebreaker. And in this circumstance, I'm going to change my vote only because Samford, I think, might actually pull off the upset. So Samford. Originally, when I made my decision, I didn't think of that. But then I had to reflect back on stuff. Next game we have is St. Bonaventure versus Stanford. Who do we have? St. Bonaventure or Stanford? I don't know who I want to vote for yet.
Stanford.
I have 1 vote for Stanford. You know what? Again, I'm going to make my point. Stanford is angry and they want something out of this, so we're going to go Stanford on that one. All right, next game is San Francisco versus Loyola Chicago. So San Francisco or I can't even pronounce it, Loyola Chicago. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I'm sure it's pronounced differently, but that's the best I can come up with.
Not Chicago. What was the other one?
San Francisco.
San Francisco.
And it looks like we got 2 votes for San Francisco. Yeah, moving forward, it just makes it easier for me not to have to pronounce that name. Nothing against that school. They're good, but hard to pronounce the name. And I apologize if I butchered it. Next game we have is going to be Chattanooga or Samford.
Chattanooga.
Yeah, I have 2 votes for Chattanooga and none for Samford. Next game we have that we'll be making a pick for, San Francisco or Stanford.
Stanford.
Yeah, I'm going to go San Francisco. I think Stanford will make their point by making it this far, but I honestly don't know or think that they're going to make it past this game. And I'm going to go San Francisco, so that puts us in a tie-breaking position. San Francisco over Stanford. I could choose to keep my vote the same, or I could change it to reflect the tiebreaker. And in this situation, I think I'm going to stick with my vote because something just tells me San Francisco is going to beat Stanford on a buzzer beater at the end of the game. So we're going to go San Francisco on that one as breaking the tie. All right, so the next game we have is Chattanooga or San Francisco. Chattanooga or San Francisco.
Chattanooga.
All right, I have 2 votes for Chattanooga. And so there we go. Now, for the National Invitational Tournament Championship, we have Arkansas State or Chattanooga. Who do y'all pick to win the championship of this prestigious tournament? That is a second-grade tournament to consider most by people. Although at its heyday, it was the big tournament that determined the national championship. Who do we have for the championship of this tournament? Arkansas State or Chattanooga?
Arkansas.
I have 1 vote for Arkansas State. I have 1 vote for Chattanooga. In this situation, I'm presented with the opportunity to change my vote or to keep the vote the same as a tiebreaker. And in this instance, I'm going to change my vote and go with Chattanooga. So we have Chattanooga in the men's basketball realm winning the championship of this tournament. For the women's basketball tournament champion, we have Alabama winning the national championship in the women's Division I basketball. And for the men, we have Tennessee winning the national championship in the men's Division I NCAA basketball tournament. So with these picks that we have made in these 3 basketball tournaments, thank you for joining me, Sports Live Media, on YouTube for this live stream. I know it's a little longer than we usually go, but we had a lot of information to go over. So if you will, please hit the like button, please hit the subscribe button, please hit the notification bell so you can be made aware of when I'm doing these live streams, when I have sports action videos, when I have sports education videos, when I broadcast live, or when I have breaking news in the sports world. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, I do encourage you to please do so. You can do it a couple of ways. One, you can go to www.youtube.com, the /symbol, the @symbol, SPORTSLOV. The simplest way is go on the YouTube search tab and type in Bob Amin. Bobamin. You'll know it's me because I have Sports Live Media burned into a basketball as my avatar. I'm also on Twitter X. My handle there is @BobAmin16. That's the @symbol, BOBAMIN16. Do any of y'all have any questions or comments regarding what we've just gone over the 3 basketball tournaments that's set to go on starting in a few days? Anybody? Well, with that, thank you again for joining me for this live stream. We will have announcements coming up in terms of what we'll be doing for future live streams. We are going to be doing some stuff for baseball. I don't quite know what we're going to do with that yet, but I will let you know as soon as I know. We will hopefully have some other live streams that are separate live streams regarding special events. But again, those will be announced as they come. So again, thank you again for joining me on this live stream. I'm Bob Amin. I hope that you have a great day. Signing off.